How's it going, everybody? We have a few of you who have joined already. We're going to give everyone a couple of moments here to hop on, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes.
While we're waiting for people to join, if folks want to just drop in the chat where they're dialing in from, see where folks are at, be cool.
Right on. We'll give everyone maybe one more minute here to hop in, and then we'll get rolling. But my name's Eric. I'm the community marketing manager here at Trout Routes, and I'm dialing in from the upper Midwest in the southwest corner of Wisconsin. And I have Benj Burke and Chad Hardwell joining me today. Benj and I are going to be walking you all through some things here on the app, and Chad's going to step in and help answer some questions, and then set us off on the right foot for our Q&A at the end of the session.
Chad and I are both calling in from Missoula, Montana.
Nice to see some folks from all over the place. I see a couple of Wisconsinites down in here. Happy to be in some good company, but thank you all for joining us. And I'm seeing folks from all over the place, which is fantastic. I'm excited to connect with everyone here this evening. Thank you all for joining us. This is, of course, the Trout Routes Pro Masterclass for March. Thank you for taking some time out of your schedules to join us here. Like I said, my name's Eric, and I have Benj and Chad here on as well. If you're just joining us, or if you missed this at the top, go ahead and drop in the chat where you're connecting from tonight. We'd love to see where folks are tuning in, and that helps us kind of direct some of the things that we'll talk about on the class this evening. I'm going to hop over to our agenda slide here. We're going to walk through the app in a number of different details here, but I want to start off just by letting everyone know that we have a couple of different ways you can connect with us. Obviously, we've all found the chat, but there is also a Q&A submission box that you can drop in specific questions that you'd like us to jump in on. We are, of course, going to talk through questions at the end of the conversation this evening. But if there are some things that come up as we're working through some things here, feel free to throw them in there, and we'll try and keep our eyes on that as well. We're going to talk a bit about some Trout Routes membership opportunities, and then touch on a little bit of Onyx authentication. We'll get into some more detail on that in just a moment. But then we're going to really walk through some high-level things here to help you out getting started in the app, talk a bit about some features at a high level, and then deep dive into some of those as well. So we'll go through map layers, navigating within the app, deciphering those icons, and what's going on the stream card, talk a bit about offline map capabilities and custom map content that you have a chance to drop in yourself. Some ways to figure out where you're located on your own app when you have the app loaded, and some functional tools like river miles. We'll talk a bit about CarPlay just briefly, go over some web maps, and then some other My content before we wrap it up with some Q&A here at the end. With that being said, whoops, we'll close this out here. I'm going to pop open the app and as I mentioned, feel free to keep the conversation going in the chat, dropping your questions in the Q&A. If you have any specific questions that relate to your account or some billing questions or things you're encountering there, please refrain from putting those in the chat. We don't need to share any of that sensitive information. We'd rather have you shoot a note to support@troutroutes.com. We're happy to help you out with all of those questions, but we want to direct you to that resource there. We are recording this session tonight, and this is going to show up on YouTube tomorrow. So if you have to hop early, or if you want to reference this down the road, make sure you check out the Trout Routes YouTube channel. You can also find some previous classes there as well, along with some other conversations that we've had with some of our other partners. Um, and with that, I think we'll kick it over to Benj, and we're going to jump in and talk a bit about some membership options.
Perfect. And Eric, I saw a couple comments about echoing, so I think if you go on mute while I speak, that might be helpful, and I'll do the same.
Sure.
Cool. Hopefully that takes care of that. Okay, so Eric's going to pop open the app here. Wait for that to pop up here. And here it comes. Okay. All right, so there's a few different membership options we're going to show you. We're going to start with basic mode, actually. So, Eric, if you don't mind popping over to basic. So, basic is our free mode. So, if you hop in and the app and just want to get used to it and check it out, you can do basic for no cost. What you're going to see if you zoom in, Eric, basically every stream, every river is going to be colored in blue. So you're going to be able to see all moving water in the Trout Routes app. You're not going to be able to see like the classes and whatnot, but at least it can get you onto the water and you can find that kind of stuff. You can also toggle between different types of maps. So, Eric, if you want to pop open the different types here. So, if you look down below, there's three types of base maps. So, there's roads, there's yep. So if you hit roads, it's just going to give you a very clean map, so you can kind of actually follow all the roads around the area. If you hit terrain, you're going to get a little more of like kind of like that topographical view. You can kind of see like where mountains are and valleys, and yeah, if you zoom in, you can really get a sense for like what you might be walking into. And then of course, satellite view is always a popular one, so you can actually see the real view of what you're getting into. So and I mean it's called basic mode for a reason, because it's our most basic featured mode. But if you join our single state or pro membership, you get a lot more functionality and robust features. So right away, Eric just popped into pro mode here. You're going to see a lot of colors. So the colors indicate all the different stream classes that are available. So gold is going to be our gold medal rivers and streams. Green will be first class one rivers and streams, and then light blue is class two, dark blue is class three. So you can kind of zoom around very quickly and just see like the ratings for rivers, what you might want to hit, especially when you're traveling and not around rivers that you're used to or commonly fish. So if you, Eric, maybe if you go out of satellite view and go back into terrain view. Thank you, sir. You can see right here really easily the green versus the gray. So green is going to show you all public land. So if you go over, you can see anything that's green is stuff that the public owns that you can access with no problem. You can also see if you kind of zoom in on a river, if you go in a little closer there, Eric, you can see like the color shading of the river is darker blue in the green zones and a lighter blue and a thinner line where it runs along private property. So that thickness just denotes where public versus private land or access is available on that river. So it makes it super easy just to very quickly understand what you can legally access. And then one note, and I think we'll touch on this a little bit more later too, is very soon we will be adding private land details. So if you were to click, like give it a month or two, but if you were to click into the private land, you could actually see ownership, if it's a company, if it's a private individual, that kind of stuff. It's anybody who uses Onyx Hunt would be familiar with that feature already. And then Eric, if you click into the green area, you can actually see so this is Targhee National Forest. So you can see, or like state of Montana or state of Iowa, whatever. So you can see the public ownership of that one. Next, a cool feature that we offer within Single State and Pro is if you find a great spot and you wanna note it, you can just double click into a spot, and it'll actually drop a pin for you. So you can create custom content basically. So if you go ahead and do that, Eric, just pretend we found a great fishing spot over here. So you can drop your own pin in here. You can name it whatever you want, like caught a 70-inch brown, whatever you want to say. Yeah, there you go. And then you can choose a different marker type, whatever you want. You can color it. I mean, if you want to have it like yellow to stand out on your map or whatever your preference is. You can basically make a custom waypoints that you can remember an exact spot. And then what's really cool is you can add notes, you can add photos, anything that you want to remember. You can, like, I always go in here and add like what the water levels were at that day, like the CFS, that kind of stuff, what the weather was like, what they were hitting. And then, yeah, and then you hit save and that'll be there for you. And it's important to know that's there for you, but only for you. Nobody else can see your special like spots or anything like that. We're very particular about not sharing information or hotspots or spot burning, any of that kind of stuff. So that's just your data that only you will ever be able to see. Um, yeah, so that's a great feature you get with Pro and single state. Another one is if you go down into tools, we give you the ability, and this is super powerful, to download offline maps. I think we're going to actually go in a little more depth on this in a bit. But if you hit the download button, it will essentially let you download an offline map, and then you can go in. And when you're like, I mean, all of us anglers end up, in places where our cell phones don't work, and you're able to pull up that map, and it'll work just like the app without any self service, which is really handy. And one thing to note is whatever mode you're in. So right now we're in the topographical terrain mode. That's what the offline map will be in. If you want to do also have like the satellite view, you'll need to go in and switch the map mode to satellite, like Eric's doing right now, and then download it again, and then maybe just name it like whatever you would name the first one, would say like satellite view or something like that. So then you can go between the two of them, and you'll have that satellite view wherever you're at. Yeah, so again, very handy one to have, and yeah, something I use quite a bit. And then lastly, I'll show you is I'd like to highlight our stream gauges. So I'm sure if we zoom around here, there's one right there. If you find this icon that Eric's about to click on, it's a stream gauge. And this is all USGS information live up to oftentimes up to like the last 5 minutes data that we're getting from these gauges. And it shows you the flow, the height, and the temperature. And then if you click within any of these, like the flow, you can actually view like data for that day, that week, that month, that year. So you can kind of see where things have been historically. There's a little gray line across there in the middle that shows you the historical average. And this is a super handy tool because if you go in, you're like, oh, I fished it last 4th of July. I don't remember what it was at though. You can go in here, go back to 4th of July and be like, oh, I was running at 250 CFS. It was a great day. So it gives you a really nice basis for where water's been at, and just, helps you have a more full day out there on the river. Um, those are the big pieces I want to talk about as far as the various options within the membership goes. One thing that we wanted to make sure folks were aware of is that you're going to start seeing, if you haven't already, some comms and some in-app messaging about authenticating with Onyx membership. So because we're obviously owned now by Onyx Maps, we're moving a lot of our backend data over to the Onyx data sets. So this is going to get us like really powerful imagery and that private land data, like really great satellite imagery. And it's a one-time thing. We just need folks to go in and create an Onyx login if you don't already have one. And there's no strings attached. There's no fees. There's nothing. It's just a one-time thing. You log in through Onyx. You'll forever be logged in that way, and you'll just get a far more like feature-rich experience. And so, if you haven't done that, please do. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to support. But yeah, that's just one thing we wanted to call out. And then I think Eric was going to hop into some map layer stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Benj. That's a great overview. Really kind of giving you some of the highlights on what you're getting between the basic and the pro levels. Now we're going to deep dive into some of what that actually means for you. And the first one that we've already touched on a bit, but we'll go into a little bit more detail here, is what the different map modes mean and what they are showing. So we've already talked about basic and how that's really just isolating and showing you streamlines and then the different base map options. Within guide mode, this is really designed to help you understand those different stream classifications and recognizing what rivers are classified in what different way. I did see a question about how we are classifying those rivers. What we're doing with trout routes is pulling in data sets, in some cases regionally, in some cases nationally. You might be familiar with your local home waters being rated class 1, 2, or 3, or in some parts of the country, class A, B, and C. And we've rolled all those together and actually applied a little bit of preferential treatment to some water that has a lot of public access or a lot of public land that water is flowing through, and in some ways downgraded some water that is either really challenging to get to, doesn't run through very much private land, or may only have a couple of access points. But if I zoom out a little bit here, you can get a pretty quick glimpse at what those different classifications look like. Obviously, in gold or yellow, you've got those blue ribbon and gold medal streams. Um, Light green is your class one. Light blue is your class two, and dark blue is your class three streams. If you're curious about tracking back to some of that information, you can always tap that filter button. And down here, um, let's see where I have my classification. We actually might have moved that. We do have a couple of references to that elsewhere, but really what we're trying to do is help you isolate and understand the different kinds of trout water across the country. And as I said, this has been standardized across the lower 48. So what you are familiar with in your backyard is going to translate elsewhere in the country. If I pop over to our access mode, access is particularly highlighting easements, national and state parks, and then again, that public land. So I'm going to toggle off of satellite view for just a moment to help us see. Oh, and it looks like I lost my classification for some reason. But access mode is helping you understand those easement layers. I'm going to give this a quick refresh because that dropped off for me. Apologize. There we go. And I'll just jump in here so you can see, the Yellowstone National Park is obviously color coded slightly different here than this other public land. Again, if you tap into any of these parcels, you can see who's managing those public land parcels. If I tap over on this green parcel over here, that's showing you a different national forest. And the last mode I want to talk about is the regulations layer. This is going to help you understand what some of those specific seasonal regulations might be, if there are lure or bait restrictions, things like that. And those are all color coded here along the bottom. And then tapping on the map legend along the bottom of your screen should pull those up. My internet in here is a little bit slow. But by tapping on these bodies of water, you'll be able to see some of these restrictions as well. And then, like we already also touched on, we have a couple of different base map options. Of course, the roads layer is going to give you a very clear picture of that public land boundary information, make it really easy to understand the stream classifications here. Terrain is going to bring in topographic lines. So if I zoom in a little bit further, you can see the detail on the topo base map, which can really help you understand what that terrain looks like before actually being on the ground. And then, of course, satellite imagery. I'm going to stick to terrain mode here for just a moment because I also want to show you how to toggle on 3D maps. So again, tapping on that layers button in the bottom right-hand corner of the app, and then toggling on 3D maps. And now you can use two fingers to scroll and get a really interesting picture of what that terrain looks like. So that base map is now turned into that relief map, and you can see in really great detail what to expect before you might be hitting the water. I'll bring us back to 2D here. And I think we're going to kick it back over to bench.
Cool. Thanks, man. Go on mute real quick. Thank you. Okay, so just a few things about getting around, zooming in and out, and finding what you want to find. So Eric already kind of touched on it. If you zoom in really close to stuff, you can get a really great view of like where you're going to be. One thing I just wanted to highlight is, Eric, if you go over to satellite mode and then you zoom in on a river, and this is a really great feature. You can do it on anything, but I love doing this actually when I'm sitting on my computer at night, and like kind of the night before I go out to a new river or a new stretch of river, just checking out the actual like terrain that I'm about to be in. And you can get close enough that you can see like bends and rivers, and like you can tell where there's a little more depth to places, or like riffles that look really good. And it's an amazing way to kind of go and just scout water before you ever get there. So yeah, so you can in satellite mode, zooming in, you can see some really cool stuff. And I found some of my favorite new spots in the last few years just with that feature right there. If you wanna, if you're like me, I'm here in Montana, but then I'm flying out to Arkansas to do the White River in a week here. If I want to zoom out, I can zoom out really quickly. And Eric, could you just pinch together and zoom out. If you're on the desktop, you can just use your mouse or your trackpad, but you just zoom out all the way out to the country view, and I can jump around to whatever state I want to. So I can, very quickly just zoom around the map, and then pinch back into to Arkansas or Idaho or whatever. So very very easy just to move around and find what you're looking for. Yeah, there you go. So that's obviously pretty intuitive, but yeah, just worth mentioning. Then you'll see at the very top here is our search bar. So say we want to like look at a certain river. So say we're going to do the Gallatin River here in Montana. So Eric's just going to type in Gallatin, there it is, Gallatin River. You go ahead and click on it, and it's going to take you right over to the Gallatin, and you're going to see all the various access points on it, all the different icons pop up. So you can do that for any body of water that's in trout routes, and we have over 50,000 streams. We have what is the actual? I think we have 280,000 access points, 50,000 rivers and streams. So anything you type in there that's been mapped, we're going to be able to take you right to, which is super handy. So Eric, if you go and zoom in on the Gallatin there, we can talk about some of these icons. So obviously, like tapping on the icons will bring up, if you tap on a fishing access point, it's going to bring up that exact fishing access point. And it's really cool because you can go down to the bottom here and you can hit directions, and it'll give you directions right to that. So if you want to drive there, and you can just cast it over to your car to CarPlay or whatever your mapping feature is, and it'll take you at Google Maps or Apple Maps. So you can get directions straight to that spot. So very handy little piece there. Eric, if we go into filters, we can talk about some of all the various icons that you'll see on these maps, and then the ability to turn things on and off. So here are the kind of the main features that Eric's showing us here in Pro. So you can see everything from public land to access to parking, camping, trailheads, boat ramps. There's a ton of different icons for anything that might interest you. And what's really nice is you can go ahead and turn those on or off depending what your interests are. By default, most of these are going to be on. So you can see Eric's turning some off. So say you are a walk waiter, you have no interest in boat ramps, or say trailheads or camping, you can turn those off and just kind of declutter the maps a little bit. Or you can leave them all on and get a ton of information in your hands. But then there's a lot of other features here as well. So I mean, like as you go down, you can see there's things for dams and habitats and where trout stocking is happening. We even have trout lakes. So of course, Trout Routes is a moving water app. But we do have lakes in here that if they are holding trout, you can turn that on and you'll have a little blue icon there that shows you where the lakes are at. We have fly shops, of course, which are a super powerful thing, especially in stream cards when you are fishing new water or just want to talk to somebody who might know where good water is or what's hatching, that kind of stuff. Of course, the gauges we talked about. And then if you go down a little bit, Eric, I'll talk about one thing down here in miscellaneous, and that is persistent settings. So right now, whenever you restart the app, there's all the default settings always revert to whatever the default settings for the app are that we were just kind of showing you. When you become more of a power user, though, you might realize that you like certain things turned on and certain things turned off. If you click the persistent settings here, turn that button on, which Eric will do right now, those will then save. So the next time you restart the app, it won't go back to all the default settings. Your personalized settings will always be saved. So it's a really great thing when you know exactly what you want and you have a set way of using the app. So that's a really handy thing that a lot of people don't know about. Just go ahead and turn that on, and then you will always have your favorite settings there at hand. And yeah, so that's kind of all the icons. And again, that's always going to be down in that bottom right in the filters section. And it's just an easy way to customize your experience in the app. All right, Eric, toss.
Right on. We're going to jump into some more of that stream gauge functionality. I know we took a quick peek at this earlier, but again, this is this icon right here. It's kind of a thermometer with a half white, half blue. river slicing through it. As Benj mentioned, this is coming in directly from USGS, as well as some other state managed gauge systems. I know Colorado has a pretty robust system of gauges, so we're pulling in information from those gauges as well, and also a handful of NOAA gauges. So we have a pretty strong coverage across the country. And so when you tap on these icons, this gauge data, whether that be flow, height, or temperature, is coming in directly from those sources. And those tend to update in real time. I believe on the USGS side, they're pulling in new data every 15 minutes or so. So we're able to be as accurate and up to date as those sources are, provided you're within some sort of cell or Wi-Fi coverage. The first one here is a stream flow. You have charts for height and temperature, but you can tap into any of these charts and really interact with them very closely. Um, by default, we're going to show you the previous 7 days worth of information. And as you scroll across this gauge, you can get really accurate and fine-tuned measurements from what those readings are. So if you wanted to go back and take a look at, maybe you had a big rain event that came through and you want to see how that's affecting the water, this is a really great way to do that. And also to get a sense of how some of that water will be affecting some of the water that you're interested in fishing. And again, along the bottom of this chart, you can toggle between day, week, month, or even up to a full year of that information. I also like to utilize the temperature information, provided that gauge has a thermometer. We're pulling in that temperature information as well. So it's certainly handy, if you're trying to get a sense of what hatches might be emerging or watching for particular rises or falls in water temperature. It's very useful. But it's also a really nice reminder to double check before you head out to make sure that those water temps are going to be appropriate for fishing and catching trout. Um, so again, this is the gauge icon right in here. You can find that on the base map. And then, like I said, you can tap directly into that icon to pull up this information as well. I also like to point out that you have the ability to save gauges to your favorites list. You can tap that save button here along the bottom. And if you go back into your My Content bucket, which I know we'll touch on in a bit more detail, but it's worth mentioning here, there's an entire section for saved streams specifically. So no longer do you need to have a number of web browser tabs open or navigate to or other tools to pull in just gauge information. You can be very conscious of the rivers that you're fishing and what those measurements are, either by checking that icon on the base map or by pulling up this list that you have saved right here, and it'll show you that up-to-date information right there at hand. We also have this gauge information directly on the stream card. So tapping into a streamline, of course, is going to pull up the stream card here. And if I scroll down to stream flow, what we're going to pull in is the nearest gauge to wherever you have tapped on that river. But you can also see all of those gauges along that particular body of water by tapping this view all button here, and it'll show you those additional gauges as well. So another really easy tool to help you understand how some of the river might be flowing in relationship to other parts, but really quick and easy access to that information via the stream card as well. You do have the ability to drop in bookmarks and save these to your favorites list as well. So perhaps you want to capture every gauge along the Gallatin. You can do that very quickly by pulling up the stream card and navigating to those river gauges as well. We also touched a little bit on offline maps at the top, but I'm going to walk you through how to create those as well. A couple of different ways you could do that. You can either tap on a streamline and then tap these three dots here at the top right of that slider and select offline. That'll help you capture the entire stretch of whatever you've tapped on. But I actually find it to be a little bit easier and more meaningful if I'm looking for information about a particular section. And to kind of fine tune that offline map, what you'll do is you'll tap on that My Content button, excuse me, on the Tools button, and then the Offline Maps button all the way there at the bottom left. Tapping that is going to open up this window, and now you have the ability to zoom around the map, really isolate the section that you're interested in, and then by hitting that download button, you can then again go ahead and name that something specific, and then that's going to show up in your Offline Maps folder within your My Content bucket as well. So worth mentioning again, just to make sure as we're thinking about it, whatever layers you have loaded, whatever icons you have loaded, if you have filtered some things out, whatever is currently loaded within the app is what's going to be captured in that offline map. So be mindful of the things that you have on the screen and the information that you're looking for before you do download that map, but you do have a fair amount of space for you to be able to capture a number of that information. So if you wanted to have, say, the satellite and the topo map, base map, you would have to download two separate offline maps, but it's very easy for you to do that. And again, it's just that tools menu along the bottom and then offline maps there at the bottom left. And I think we'll kick it back to Ben to talk a little bit about your location and then tapping into some river miles information.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, so going to show you a super cool feature on how to measure exactly the river that you're going to be on, the stretch of the river that you're going to be on. First, like Eric said, my location. So if you see that icon on the bottom right above filters, below the layers, kind of the circle, if you click on that, it'll always take you back to where you're currently at. So it's nice, just kind of reset button if you're zooming around and want to find where you're at real quickly. You just hit that and it'll take you right back. Of course, your cell phone needs to be have location services turned on. Usually that's a default setting on most folks' phones, but make sure that's on. So if you want to see where you're at, you can. One really cool thing that I want to show you all now is how to measure the exact mileage of a stretch of river that you're going to be on. This is super powerful if you are going to be floating the river, or if you're going to be walking a long ways along it, I suppose. But anytime we're like, oh, like the where we drop the boat off and where we drop our car off is 5 miles on the highway. Well, that could be 9 miles on the river, as we all know. And so, being able to measure the river is a super important thing for convenience, for safety, all that kind of stuff. So this is a really great feature. So what you're going to do is down on the bottom under Tools, right where Eric just found offline maps, you're going to see right next to it River Miles. So go ahead and click River Miles and you're going to choose wherever you're putting your boat in or starting your long walk and wade. And so say you put in right wherever, let's see where Eric drops it. So there's your first marker. And then say you're floating all the way up here, like past this little town, and you drop that there. And so between point A and point B on the bottom right there, it shows you to the 100th of a mile how far it is. So 1.45 miles. Obviously, you can go a lot farther. Even you can go way down the river, and you're doing like an all-day float. Drop 1 point, and Eric does another one, and that's 6.75 miles. So again, really, really great tool for when you have that one friend pick you up and he's like, oh, it's a 3 hour float, and you're like, well, actually it's 9 miles, not the 3 miles that the road is, so it's gonna be eight hours. Yeah, really, really handy tool that a lot of folks get excited about when we show them. I think that was the one I was going to show. Eric, were you going to show a web piece of that?
All right, so far this evening we've been going over how Trout Routes shows up on a tablet, but of course this is a mobile app that you can bring up on your phone and a desktop app as well. The easiest way to navigate to the desktop version of Trout Routes is to go to maps.troutroutes.com, and you'll use your same login credentials to log into your account. And so anything that you do as far as dropping pins, saving things to your favorites list, things like that will travel with you with your account, no matter what the platform you're logging in on. So I just wanted to call out the web map here briefly. You'll notice that it looks very similar. We have tried to pull in the same iconography, the same um, color coding for everything. So it's going to look exactly the same whether you're on your desktop, your phone, or a tablet. But what I like to use the web map for, especially if I'm doing some e-scouting or I'm looking up some places I've never fished before, is to use the web map because it gives me obviously a much larger view of the screen, but it also helps me to understand maybe some other points of reference that I'm familiar with and help me get an idea and an understanding of how I might navigate to some of these areas. So I have a couple of things here in Utah, just as an example. Again, I have the same base map layers that show up in guide mode. You can see the color classification systems here, all these fishing access icons, and then the same functionality whenever you tap on a stream, showing you a stream card, letting you tap in and understand all that information. Similar functionality here with stream flow, so you can get a sense of what stream flows and heights, and in some cases temperature are up to. And then again, similar tool functionality here. If I wanted to drop a custom marker, I can either long press um, to create a new marker, or I can open up this marker tool here along the side. We also have that same functionality here on River Miles, and then some other tools at your disposal as well. So just another option for you as you're starting to dig into some of this information. It's a great way to have maybe a secondary screen, bring up some more of that information, get a higher level overview, as well as to drop some pins, save access points or other icons that you're interested in coming back to later. There are a couple of limitations, mostly when it comes to things like custom markers, which is in the works and it will be added here shortly. But I also want to just call out that the things that you are dropping in as far as your account will continue to be private to your account, but will travel with you if you're logging in with that same login and password as well. So something else to keep in mind, especially here as we're getting closer to the beginning of the season, if you're looking for some new water, you want to explore a little bit, this is a great way to do that. And then I'll pull up the iPad again here, and then Benj will talk through a couple more updates that we made recently.
Thank you, Eric. And again, that map address that he was showing was maps.troutroutes.com. So that's a great way to scout where you're going. Okay, so one thing we wanted to show folks, and this is going to be for the Apple iOS users out there, some new features that we just added coming to Android at a time TBD, but for right now, this is on iOS only. If you look in the upper left corner, there's two drop-down pills, we call them. So there's two drop-downs for stream class and for species. So if you hit the stream class one, you can see the four classes that we've been talking about: the gold, class one, class two, class three. And what's really nice is you can go ahead and filter by the class. So like personally, like in the summertime, I love going blue lining, and I want to get away from like the crowds and the big rivers. So I'll go in there and I'll just select class three, like Eric just did, hit apply. And then I can see just the kind of like the small, less crowded streams in my area, which is a really nice feature. It really kind of declutters the map and lets me focus in on the type of fishing I want to do for that day. So yeah, so then if Eric clicks back in there, he can hit on the upper right clear selection, and it'll bring everything back up. Or yeah, he can do class ones and twos or any combination, and just kind of really quickly customize the type of water that you're looking for on that particular outing. The next one is the drop down for species. And this is a super cool new feature that we're excited to be rolling out. We've actually rolled this out now to 9 Western states. You can see all of them there, from California to Idaho, Nevada, Utah, etc. And again, this will be eventually rolled out more broadly, but for now we're rolling it out in the West, and it's a lot of back end data and work for our developers. So we're making progress, but for right now, it's the 9 states in the West. But it's really cool that you can see all these various different species. So like tons of different trout species, including up to like I think 7 cutthroat types of cutthroat. There's popular trout, there's salmon, there's steelhead, there's whitefish, there's Arctic grayling. And yeah, you can basically like go in there and kind of search by what you're looking for, what you want to catch. So for a good example, Eric has selected cutthroat, so you can see all the waters that cutthroat swim in. And so if you've never caught one and you're out west and you want to find a cutthroat, you can search by species and figure out where they're at. A really cool one, like Eric, if you hit the top one, go back into species and hit grayling. So graylings like swim in a lot less rivers out here. So if you hit apply there, it's going to see, you saw a ton of color disappeared, but you can see a few ones like around Butte and Bozeman over there, up yeah, by Glacier National Park on the North Fork of the Flathead, it looks like. And yeah, you can see exactly a river, like the few and far between rivers that the Arctic grayling are in, if you want to find one. So again, just a really cool way to go in there and figure out where a certain type of species is, and be able to target them more accurately. Yeah, so just a couple cool features, and I think those are the new ones we wanted to show. And then Eric was going to talk about the various my content pieces.
Yeah, just before we hop off of species data, I also want to call out that we are including this information right on the stream card as well. So I tapped on the North Fork of the Flathead as we were looking at Arctic grayling, but you can also see the other species that you can expect to find in that body of water. So this is also going to be true of those 9 states that we have this species data rolled out to. You can go in and see on any river you've tapped on. If I clear this out, just go back to our regular settings, tap on another river here. Here's the lower Flathead. You can either tap the species tab or just scroll down on that stream card and you'll be able to pull that up right in here. And then I know you mentioned my content just a little bit as far as stream gauges and offline maps, but this is also where you're going to be able to quickly find your custom markers or pins that you've dropped and other things that you've added yourself. So if you tap on that my content along the bottom, this is where all that information is going to show up. It's a folder for your offline maps that you've generated. If you have any streams bookmarked to your account, they're going to show up in here. All of those stream gauges are going to be in their separate folder, and then of course those custom markers as well. So really handy and an easy way for you to quick reference any of that information that you've dropped in yourself, and also another handy way to reference some of that information as the season goes on. I know I'm typically using a lot of custom markers to identify access points that I'm interested in, or if I found a particularly good looking stretch of river that I want to make sure I remember when I'm out on the water. But this is also another great way for you to record your time on the water and use those custom markers to either take notes about what flies were working for you that particular day. If you wanted to drop in a photo, you have the ability to do that as well. And then just to quickly go over generating those markers, it's as easy as long pressing on the screen to drop a pin and then tapping on create marker. And now you've got the ability to name that something unique, adjust the icon type if you have something specific in mind, change that icon color, and then go ahead and drop in notes there as well. And that's what we have for my content. Oh, I do see a question here about custom markers and importing and exporting. I can touch on that real quick. Yes, you do have the ability to both export out of trout routes or import from other mapping services like other Onyx tools. You do need to be on the web app to do that, so make sure you're logged into a desktop. But there is a way for you to import those batched icons by tapping. And actually, let me switch over to the web map and I can show that to you here. All right, I'm over here in the web app again. I've tapped on the My Profile button here along the left-hand menu, and there's an option down in your account settings to either import or export. The files that you're importing do need to be a particular type, and when you import them, they will all be synced under a similar marker type, but it's as easy as dragging and dropping right in here. All right, that kind of covers our rundown of what we wanted to touch on for you this evening. Thank you for everyone's participation and for the great questions. I know we're going to pivot over and jump into some more specific Q&A here, and maybe I'll have Chad hop in. And I'm curious, Chad, if you've noticed anything pop up that we haven't answered yet already, or that you haven't had a chance to answer yet in the chat.
The main one I've seen is customers are confused about the Onyx link. So I'll just touch on that because I'm the one that's actually the one that'll be helping you out with that. Just shoot us an email at that support at Charrouts, and I can try to figure out what's going on with your account, figure out everything, and make sure you guys are set up properly. And then one other question I saw was about persistent settings.
Something specific to persistent settings, or just curious about what that actually means for your account?
I think that more or less just going over it and making sure that 'cause there was some people with some complaints that when they turned things on and they opened the app up, it wasn't working again for them. So just kind of touching on that.
Sure, I would double check what you have selected within your filters. Let's go back to the iPad and we'll pull that up again. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom of your filters menu, and again, that's the lower right-hand button along the bottom, that's where you can toggle on or off those persistent settings. And essentially what that will mean for your account is if you have persistent settings turned on, anything that you're changing within your filters menu is going to stick with you. It's what that's calling out. So if you wanted to kind of customize your view of trout routes and show it the same way every time you open it up, you want to have that persistent settings turned on. If you're not seeing something that you're expecting to see, that would be something else I would double check. So if you have something turned off by accident, perhaps, and you have those persistent settings selected, those icons may be hidden, but that would be another way to troubleshoot that. I'll hop over to the Q&A here. I do see a couple in here. And let's just take it here from the top. Question from Bill about how do we access or download or use Onyx? He doesn't seem to be familiar. So Onyx is our parent company. The other products that Onyx supports are things like Onyx Hunt, Onyx Off-Road, Backcountry, or Onyx Fish. You don't need to access or have another Onyx product to jump in and use Trout Routes. What the Onyx authentication is really doing is creating a login credential for your profile that will allow you to link into the Onyx database once we complete that technology migration. It's a lot of kind of behind the scenes stuff that it's not going to affect any of the data that you're seeing, and in fact, give you access to better and more powerful Onyx data sets. But when you're seeing that pop up, that's what that's calling out is we're just asking you to create a login account that matches the Onyx database system, and you don't necessarily need to have another Onyx tool or app associated with that. Question here from Jerry about can you have access to only two states? At the moment, we do not have that ability. You either would need to select a single state option or the lower 48, which is our National Pro subscription. Um, for the most part, we tend to find that our users are, if they're sticking to one state, that's great. If they happen to be traveling, they're usually traveling outside of more than one state or more than two states. And so we've decided to just jump in and offer those two separate tools for the moment. And then I have a question here at the bottom from Daniel about other tutorials and our YouTube channel. Yes, absolutely, Daniel. We do have other tutorials on our YouTube channel. This conversation will be or it's being recorded and will be hosted on our YouTube channel by the end of the day tomorrow. But we do have a number of other conversations that we've recorded and dropped in there as well. Some of them are similar to this masterclass that we're doing this evening, but we've also had an opportunity to bring in some other Trout Routes partners to deep dive into some of the work that they're doing and share some of their experiences with the app and some other really great tips and tricks on some specific fishing techniques. So I would encourage you to jump in on the Trout Routes YouTube channel to find some more of that information.
Eric, there's a question about the difference between trout routes and onyx fish too. You want to do that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So you might be familiar, or some of you might be familiar with Onyx Fish that was launched early last year. And the folks on that team are really focusing on still water and more conventional angling tactics. And so they're bringing in different kinds of data to support those fishing techniques. They are using a lot of data around lake bathymetry or lake bottom, so basically topo maps for the bottom of a lake, as well as some other interesting things around species and things like that. Um, for the moment, we are two completely separate tools. Trout Routes will continue to remain our moving cold water platform, while the Onyx Fish team is going to be focusing on that still water application. Let's see, what else do we have in here? Question from Tom about whether or not a stream was stocked or wild, and noticing a recent update. Tom, I'm not particularly familiar with this one, but it may have just come under a recent update that moved that into the pro or single state subscription plan. Um, I would have you shoot a note to support, and we can help dig into that one for you and get that one resolved. Here's a question from Michael about the different colored dots. Let me pull an example of that up for everybody. So those are actually showing you bridge crossings. Um, and why don't we just, for argument's sake, let's take us back to the upper Midwest and look at a couple of things here in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, for example, there are a lot of access opportunities, and bridge crossings happen to be one of them. And so when you tap on a streamline, you might see these dots here. These are going to show up in either orange or blue, but they are denoting bridge crossings, and the color differences are indicating whether or not we've identified Street View connectivity within Google Maps. So anything in orange, if you tap on those icons, will show you what the bridge is, and then you can tap on that Street View button at the lower left hand of that card, and that'll jump you right to a Google Street View of that particular location. Question here from Clayton about limits on the amount of offline map storage. That's a great question. There was an update that happened a couple of years ago to one of the services that we were using to host those offline maps that severely limited that from what we had originally offered. With the Onyx database migration, that is going to open up the door to quite a bit more substantial offline map capability. It's not actually linked to the amount of storage space on your phone. It's the amount of storage space that the app is basically allowing you to capture at one time. So sit tight on that one. That expansion is coming here in the next month or so. And once we have done, or once we've completed that migration into the Onyx databases, that's going to allow quite a bit more of that functionality for you. There's a question about whether or not we might be adding more waterways to the app in the future. That's an excellent question. We've certainly had plenty of conversations about how we might move ourselves into the warm water space, and it's an ongoing conversation that we've been having as a team here internally. I can't promise any new warm water in the near future, but I think the integration of some of that species data that Ben was talking about likely will be an avenue for us to allow some of that functionality. It's an excellent question. We certainly have some great warm water here in Wisconsin. I know that there are a lot of fly anglers, a lot of anglers in general that are looking for resources for that additional moving water. So we appreciate that feedback, and we'll make sure that we add that to the team's feedback because it is helpful when we hear from folks like you who are looking for some of that access. Benj, anything you want to jump in on? I'm going to navigate a little bit before I answer the next question.
Just a couple of that are over in the chat I just saw. Sorry, folks, we're looking mostly at the Q&A thing, but I just noticed in the chat there's more questions. One was, what's the difference in the width of the line mean? So the thicker width is going to be where it touches public access, and the thinner lines are going to be where it's going through private land. There was a question also, will we have landowner names access? You will when the new update happens in, we believe, mid-May. Similar to Onyx Hunt, you will see private data parcel information. So yeah, you will have that.
I'm going to hop in and answer this one about trails. I was trying to find a spot that had a couple of those listed here. Bruce is asking how trails show up, and we have identified a number of hiking or walking trails that are within a certain vicinity of trout water, and you'll see those here in this purple dashed line. Some trailheads are marked. We have had some conversations about how we might potentially in the future leverage some other Onyx databases and data sets to show more of that trail information. But that's an easy way for you to pull that up is if you're looking at that base map, you'll see in that purple dashed line that's denoting a trail there. Ken has a question about how can you tell which direction the water is flowing? We don't have specific like directional arrows, but one way to pull that up would be to click on a creek or a river and then take a look at the elevation data. So this is here at the top of the stream card, and as you drag your finger along, you can see as I drag my finger along the chart of that elevation data, I can see how that elevation is changing. So of course, I'm starting here on the left. And as I work my way to the right, we are going down in elevation. So that would mean that the water is flowing in this frame from left to right or west to east. There's a question here about the topography of the river. I'm guessing, Hagen, you're asking about river bottom. There are not a ton of great data sets out there for river bottom, mostly because the shape of river bottoms change very frequently. One way that you might be able to get a better understanding of depth would be to take a look at a stream gauge. And let's pull one of those up here and then simply toggle to the height chart to help you get a sense of the height of the water. But that's about as close as we'll get there. Great comment about trails. John, thanks you for the feedback. The comment was that they're using the trails quite extensively and would be interested in seeing some of that better supported. I think that's a great call out. Certainly for some of those blue lining applications where you are likely getting into some higher elevation and the access points may be a little bit limited, but allow you to figure out some other ways to get to that water. There's a question from Steve about an Onyx and a Trout Route subscription. We are still and will continue to be separate subscriptions for the time being. There are no plans for us to merge into another Onyx product. So, Steve, we are currently a separate subscription. However, there are plenty of opportunities in the future for those things to kind of merge around. I will say, certainly as we've been talking a bit about Onyx Fish, there are some questions about that. So that feedback is very helpful. But I can assure everyone that Trout Routes is not being lumped into another Onyx tool for the time being, and we will continue to be a standalone tool that is fully supported by us and the rest of the Trout Routes team. And we've got just a couple of minutes left here, so if anyone has any lingering questions, please drop them in, and we'll try to cover as many as we can in the last couple of minutes. Daniel's got a question about species. Yes, Daniel, the question was, can I figure out what species are in a river? Yes, you absolutely can. For the states that we have species data supported, the best way to do that would be to tap on any river or stream and then scroll down on the stream card to the species section, and you'll see those listed right here in the middle. Jerry asks if we have any plans for a 2 or a 3 state pro subscription. Not at the moment. We are limiting that to a single state or a national plan. Bruce has a quick question about temporary or emergency regulations that would affect stream closures. That's an excellent question, and that's kind of the next major milestone that we have on our backlog that we're working through to find some data sets that have that information and finding some really clear and immediate ways to get that incorporated into Trout Routes. One of the challenges with a lot of that is that sometimes those closures will not necessarily be posted or captured in a particular database. And so we're trying to find some creative ways for us to gather that information by working with partners, by working with other folks on the ground to help inform how we are displaying that to you all right in the app. There's a question about being able to use a touchscreen in a vehicle, like something with CarPlay. Yes, Trout Routes is currently supported in CarPlay. For the moment, it is really helping you see different base maps and understanding where the trout lines and the trout water is. But excellent point about some other functionality that we want to be able to bring into a vehicle. And I'm hoping that by wrapping up this database migration into Onyx, we'll be able to leverage some more of the tools that other Onyx teams have built for other products to make it easier for us to integrate that here into Trout Routes. We got a couple more questions here. I'll try to answer them here quickly. Here's a question from John about the Onyx account again. Just to make sure everyone's clear on what's going on with the Onyx authentication, that's simply creating a new account for you within the Onyx database and will be directly linked to your current Trout Routes account. And really what that's doing is once we complete a lot of back-end data and technology polishing, that's going to give us access to the full Onyx database of information, and that Onyx account is what's going to allow you to tap into that. It will not affect your account status or the amount of data that you have access to or your subscriptions or anything like that. It's simply just linking an account into the Onyx database to make sure that your account stays up to speed and you have the most up-to-date version of the app once that migration happens. All right, well, here we are at the top of the hour, and I think we're going to call it here. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us this evening. Thank you, Benj, and thank you, Chad, for your support. It was a pleasure to walk through some of the things that we're really excited about here at Trout Routes, and we appreciate you all stopping by. And Benj or Chad, if you have any last remarks, I'll let you throw them in now.
Thanks, everybody. Eric, great work. I appreciate you hopping on all those questions. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
All right, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening and have a fantastic fishing season, and we'll see you on the water.